Hello, my name is Jo from Strawberry Attic, and today I am showing you a jacket I recently made using an extant garment from the SnowHill Manor, the riding habit that has been translated into a real pattern in Janet Arnold's Patterns of Fashion 1. These books are fantastic if you haven't seen them. The scale in the book works out to be about 1 square in the book is an inch in size. So the first thing I did was work out roughly what the size of the actual garment is. So working out across the back and the waist, the back was just under the arms and across the bust, which is the widest point, and then the narrowest point of the waist. The extant garment actually works out to be about a 39-inch bust and a 29-inch waist, and then the nape of the neck down to the waist is 9.5 inches. I needed 16 inches, but I think that ended up a little bit too big and I had to make alterations to that. But that was the scale that I used to size up the pattern. So dividing that 16 inches by the 9.5 on the pattern gave me a scale of 1.68. So then taking all the other measurements that I'd taken from the pattern, I scaled up to a 1.68 of that size, hoping to get it a little bit closer to what I was going to need to fit my voluminous bosom. So working this out under the arm on the back piece, or the line of the underarm across the back piece, scaling the 5.5 inches of the original up by 1.68 gave me a new measurement of 9.25, and then doing the same again with the waist of 4 inches, scaling it up by 1.68, that gave me a 6.75 inch waist on the new waistline of my pattern. Doing the same with the front piece, the 14 inch under the bust measurement ended up being 23.6 inches with the scaled up version, and then the waist of 10.5 scaled up, and that was going to give me a new measurement of 17.64. Now this did actually end up, once I worked out the sizing, you obviously needed to duplicate each piece twice because you need 2 pattern pieces on the back and 2 pattern pieces on the front to give you the new size. And this ended up being quite a bit too big for me once I did scale it up. So the new waist ended up being 48.7 inches, and then the underarm across the bust size ended up being a new measurement of 65.5 inches, and that's way bigger than what I have, so I then had to go back and do a little bit of adjusting. So what I did was worked out what my actual measurements are. So I have a natural bust of 48 inches, and then my natural waist is 42 inches. Usually when doing these measurements, you'd actually take your measurements whilst wearing the correct undergarments for the period. So for this it would be a pair of stays. However, I'd already decided that I didn't want this just to be a historic item. The inspiration I got from the pattern, you'll see a little bit later on, but it wanted to be a little bit more spooky. And then I realised with all the hard effort I was putting in, I actually wanted it to be a little bit more than just something that was going to be worn for the spooky season. So I made this without actually measuring to undergarments, so I could start wearing it as a day-to-day item, but we'll get to that a bit later on. So what I decided to do was take that difference of the pattern pieces of 17.5 inches from my natural bust, this being the biggest difference, and I actually decided to split that into 3 different places. So I took out a measurement twice on the front bust piece, and then 1 cut in the back, as you've seen me do with patterns where I've sized them up before. This time I was taking like a chunk out of the patterns to size it back down again. I actually ended up with about 5 different mock-ups of this before I started cutting the proper fabric. My measurements weren't quite right, and I really wanted, knowing the amount of effort that was going to go into this jacket, I really wanted it to work out to be the correct sizing for me to be able to wear as a day-to-day item. First I cut out of horsehair braid for the back panel because I knew that it was going to end up taking quite a bit of weight. And then I originally was going to use a black cotton twill, and then I got my hands on this faux suede. And it's a really lovely fabric. It's got the slightest bit of stretch in it, but not too much. But it's a really easy fabric to sew with, so I decided to change my mind. That did bite me on the bum a little bit later on, but I do like the fabric that I've made it with overall. So starting off, I just sewed up the back seam on the jacket, and then I hand tacked the horsehair braid into this. And then what I did was I used the seam allowance to open it up and used that as boning channels. I was very conscious when using this, because it is a faux suede. I didn't want to crush the pile, so when it came to ironing, first of all I ironed it on the back using my hand to keep the shape of the sway back, and then when I started ironing the front of it, I actually put just a little bit of cotton gauze between the iron and the fabric so as not to put any burn marks on or any iron marks left in the pattern or in the fabric. Oh, and there's Willow going outside for a little bit of fresh air. And here she comes back. It's obviously biscuit time to pester Mum for a biscuit. Well, not right now, Willow, I'm busy ironing. Anyway, so as I say, I tacked the horsehair braid down into the fabric of the jacket because I knew that I was going to do some beading on this jacket. I needed to make sure that it was going to keep its shape and the beading wasn't going to stretch the fabric. So sewing this horsehair braid in, it seemed like the right option to go with. Also, the two pieces of boning, they were just zip ties that I used as boning because they seemed to work really well for me, but they did give the back of the jacket that little bit of extra strength to support the weight of the bits and pieces that I was going to do later. All the edges of this were serged. They both seemed to, the suede and the horsehair braids both seemed to have a tendency to unravel a little bit. And knowing that I was going to have to do lots of work before the jacket was finished being constructed, I decided to just whip them through the serger. And then I sewed the side of the side fronts to the back as well. Ended up not quite being true to the original pattern. By the time I'd done all my alterations, the back piece should have started to come out under the arms a little bit more, and I did lose that in my alterations. But the shape of the jacket by the end I was quite happy with. Reason for making this jacket, I actually got some inspiration from a Halloween page that I'm on Facebook last year. Someone had used a mannequin and made the most fantastic sculpture from it, where the mannequin had been opened up, revealing the rib cage and the bones in the back of the body. I absolutely loved it and thought how amazing this would look in an item of clothing. Now I know there have been a number of catwalk styles that have used similar to this, but I wanted to give my own version a go because I certainly don't have the dollar to afford something like that. Now, to construct the bones, what I did was I got some memory foam. I knew if I was going to start using this jacket as an everyday piece, getting in and out of the car or sitting in the office, I was going to be putting some weight into the back of the jacket, and I didn't want to end up with some saggy old bones after a couple of wears, so I thought memory foam would be a good option. Started off by cutting out the shoulder blades, trying to get the best shape that I could. I think if I had the facilities to, I'd probably spray these in like a plasti dip or something, instead of what I ended up doing was wrapping the foam in just some cotton gauze, just so it had the whiteness and the smoothness of a bone. And once I'd cut all the pieces out and got them all wrapped up in the fabric, I was ready to start applying them to the back of the jacket. In hindsight, I think probably if I was going to try this again, I'd increase the number of bones, maybe have some extra bones coming out from the spine to the shoulder blades, but it just gave an idea of the back of a skeleton the way I did it. Well, I hope it did anyway. My darling husband likened it more to a face hugger from Alien, and now every time he sees me in the jacket, he says, "Oh, you've got your alien coat on." No, darling. Anyway, so once I'd got all the bones in place and pinned on, I tacked them on just with a simple black cotton stitch round. They weren't going to have any weight on them, they just needed to stay in place. And then once all my bones were in place, the real fun could begin. The jacket, to give the look of being an open back, I wanted to make it look as bloody as possible, and fresh blood usually glistens in the light, so I decided to cover the back of the jacket in a mixture of Swarovski crystals in various sizes, in a dark red and a lighter red. I think it's a cyan, the colour, and also some beading. As I said, originally the jacket I was going to make with a black cotton drill. And the Swarovski crystals probably would have worked a lot better on this drill because there's a slight fluff to the fake suede. I found that they do come off really, really easy, but using proper fabric glue seems to do the job of sticking them back on. So as and when they fall off, they will just get popped back on again. Working around the main bones, I used a faceted teardrop shaped crystal, because I wanted to make it almost look like the blood sunk away from the bones and they were out a little bit, sort of more pronounced. And I seemed to spend forever sewing these crystals and beads on. I knew it was going to be a labour of love, which was why I decided this jacket was never going to be just a Halloween project. And why I decided to make it out of something that I was going to, and in a size that I'm going to be able to wear more often. But it took forever. I think I worked on it probably sort of an hour a night, 3 nights a week over about 3 months. It took far too long. I should have stayed focused, but I kept coming up with different projects in between. But eventually I did get there with the beading. But here's a little montage of me attaching all those beads in amongst the crystals. So once the jacket's beading was all finished, I finished connecting on the arms. The only problem with the Janet Arnold Patterns of Fashion books is they don't have the marks that you'd find on a regular store-bought pattern, and this did cause a little bit of problems while lining up. The jacket has a peplum on the back, and it also has the sleeves to attach, and because you don't have these markings on the pattern, it's a little bit of trial and error to get them to line up perfectly. I think I got there in the end, and it was a little bit difficult, so I got there in the end with the sleeves, but it was a little bit more difficult with the peplum. The original jacket would have been worn over a bum roll, but because I wanted to be wearing this day to day, I don't know if you've ever tried to drive a car in a bum roll, but I can tell you now it's not comfy. So I had to be able to wear this jacket both with the bum roll for the photos and without, so it was a little bit of trial and error with fitting that peplum on. It got there in the end, and then the closure, the actual jacket was a little bit wider open and doesn't have a collar, but I find because of my inherited double chin, thanks Dad, that I don't really suit the higher neck jacket, so I wanted a V-neck collar to make it a more flattering style, and that did take quite a bit of trial and error to get that sitting right. I've never done any formal tailoring, and the only 2 items of clothing I've made with a collar, I've self-drafted the collar. I've not actually made a proper pattern with a collar to learn the proper way to do it, so it's a little bit of a bodge job, but in the end it gave the look I was wanting it to. The jacket was then lined in a red satin to make it easier to get on and off. I added some big flamboyant cuffs as well, and then buttons wise I really struggled to find the right buttons for the jacket, and then I remembered the jacket buttons that used to belong on my dad's old Fire Brigade coat from way back when. They've been sitting in my loft for the longest time, so I took those buttons off and used them for this coat, and they make me smile every time I do the jacket up. So here's the finished piece. I did add a little bit of paint to those bones to make them that little bit more 3D, but I was so chuffed with myself once I saw it finished. As I say, it's not quite how I imagined it would be, and yes, I would go in and make some changes, but it was still really, really fun, and I do get an awful lot of comments when walking through the supermarket wearing it. I don't think many people are expecting to see it, especially now Halloween is over, but I am wearing this bad boy all year long. Absolutely love it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed seeing the jacket that I've made using Janet Arnold's Patterns of Fashion book. I do hope to give a few more of her patterns a go. Whether I'll make them spooky or not, I'm not entirely sure. So if you've enjoyed watching the video today, it'd be really awesome if you could give this video a like. And also I'd love to hear your comments on what I've been making, because I really appreciate you all for coming to see me make my clothes. And also hit subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of what I'm making. I've got another Halloween project coming up, and then a few more different things to see me through the winter until it's back to doing fun springtime bits again. Anyway, thanks ever so much. Bye bye.